Today I'm going to tell you about the time that, well, some guy told you about the time that somebody told him about the time. You know what? I'm just going to make videos about all the videos that you see on the screen over there. Why? Why would I do such a thing? No, I don't need to, but some idiot in Iowa thought it was a good idea. Yeah, so it's his fault, not mine. Before I say anything more stupid than I've ever said before in my life, let me say two things real quick. Number one, no, he really did say that. So I'm a really good person about following instructions. I know a dare when I see one. That sounds like a whole hell of a lot of fun. Also, number two, before I say another word, I'm going to say this. I understand. Sergeant Reckless was not a mule. I know he was not a mule. He's one of the greatest horses to ever exist in the history of man. I mean, this horse literally helped prevent the fall of Seoul from Chinese invaders during the Korean War, saving hundreds of thousands of lives. This horse was so important, not a mule. They put him on a boat, brought him home, made him a national fucking treasure. Okay? I get it. Okay? I was wrong. If that bothers you, if me saying one thing incorrect bothers you so much that that is the most common comment of the previous video I made about the fat electrician, do me a favor. Whatever you do, don't watch any of the donut operator's videos. Everything he makes will piss you off more. Hi everybody, my name is OldSkuleNerd. Now that I've got that out of the way, somebody dared me to do a thing, so we're gonna do it. And you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna start at the very beginning. Yep. The very, very beginning, the first video I've ever seen, the time that America obliterated half of Iran's Navy in an 8-hour workday. Yes, it's one of the most well-done videos the fat electrician's ever done. Why am I making a video about it? Well, because it would be fun, and I love watching this video multiple times for two reasons. Number one, it never gets old, and number two, my wife hates it. 2 for 2. Also, let me also say this real quick. Everybody knows that Nick's wife is also a national treasure. She never carried ammo, but she does show up a lot wearing guns in his videos on their little promos of Delete Me. I understand Nick made a fatal error by showing her how to carry firearms and probably took her to range on how to use one. That's probably the way he's going to go by pissing her off. I'm not so lucky. My wife does not know how to use firearms, but she is way more devious than that. She'll just wait for me to fall asleep and kick my CPAP hose. So yeah, that's how that works. Also, this is also how this is going to work. Most of these videos will be shot on Wednesday night on my Twitch channel live. Yes, boys and girls, there is no script. There are no bullet points. Bullet points? Shit. My only deployment in the military was peacekeeping mission in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Kosovo. They didn't even give us bullets. Forget bullet points. We didn't even have live ammunition the whole time we were there. Anyway, let's get into it. Every Wednesday night, I'm going to be live on Twitch. Every Wednesday night, I'm going to take this out, which if you ask the habitual line crosser, he'll tell you that this is a multi-directional reflective array. I call it a disco cowboy hat. I'm going to turn this thing inverted, which you should never do because all you're going to do is catch rain. Anyway, I'm going to have pieces of paper in here, okay? And the pieces of paper are not going to be about the video. No, the video we're going to go in the order that he made them, which always works out well for everyone. In the hat, there will be options. What are some of the options? Well, the options will be kind of a video like this, where all I do is mention things about the video that either the fat electrician didn't say right, probably won't happen very often. I can reflect about things that occurred to me in my military experience or stories that I've heard from my family members who are all career military. I might do that. Or it may be roast it. Yeah, I might pull out a piece of paper and it says roast it, which means I'm going to make every joke that makes fun of everything that I see. Just the way it is. Or in the worst possibility, it might just say the hat. If I pull a piece of paper out on a Wednesday night live on Twitch and it says the hat, those of you who have been to my channel know exactly what the hat means. The hat means that I put this on my head. Okay? If I put this on my head, I am no longer old school nerd. No, the guy that I become is the worst of all of us. He's the best of all of us. He comes from a small town called Gun Barrel City, Texas. And he's a lot of fun. Anyway, let's get to it. All right, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do a reaction. It's not a true reaction. I've seen this video, if I'm not mistaken, at least 24 times. Loved it every time. I have some thoughts. I have some things. My father was in the Navy for 14 years during the Vietnam era. Also, let me also rephrase this. Anything that Nick, the fat electrician, says about modern military warfare, modern military techniques, strategies, equipment, anything, MOSs, I have no fucking clue. I won't know. I served in the military in the 90s. When I was in the military, Ronald Reagan was not the president. Nope. Slick Willie was, which means we did a lot of peacekeeping and we never went into the Oval Office with cigars. You just don't do it. Just don't. It's not a good idea. But okay, so so you get what I'm saying, okay? My military experience is going to be different. If I refer to a fort, if I say Fort Hood, Fort Polk, Fort Bragg, not trying to piss you off, not trying to offend anybody. That's just the name that I remember, okay? That's the name that I grew up, and because I don't have everything listed out, I'm not going to say the names right anyway. Also, there's another reason why I do that. If all of the names of all of these different forts are so offensive to people because the people they're named after are horrible, horrible beings, good. I think we should keep the names exactly as they are. Not to promote or honor those people, but just to remind you that nothing fun ever happens at training bases in the U.S. military. It is all suffering and pain, and everyone's going to remember their visit there with horror, dread, and infamy, which is exactly how should we remember. We should all remember the assholes from the 1860s. Deal? Deal. Okay, here we go. My first non-reaction reaction. Old school nerd. A non-combatant from a non-wartime military does a reaction to the fat electrician. Are you ready? Yeah, I lived what he's about to talk about. I remember it. I was like 14 years old. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it's terrible. All right, let's do it.
Today we're talking about Operation Praying Mantis. But real quick, this video is sponsored by Zydak's custom gaming PCs. They are all built right.
You know, I tried to buy a Zydak, but couldn't afford it. It was out of my budget at the time. It's in my budget now. If this one dies, everything he's about to tell you is the reason why I'd probably buy one. Straight up. You don't believe me? Watch this shit.
Here in America with American-based tech support and a lifetime warranty. It's the computer that I use and the one that I would recommend. I'll have them linked down below if you want to check them out. Let's get to this video. All right, Important background info. 1980, Iraq decided to invade Iran. Why? Don't really care. Not pertinent to the story. However, at the end of that war, Iran decides, hey, we're going to pull a page out of the old Art of War by Sun Tzu. We're going to cut off the enemy supply lines, deprive the enemy of nice things. It's going to work out great. Iraq's got a weak navy. We're going to wipe out their navy, and then every time they send out an oil tanker through the Persian Gulf, we're going to blow that up. So they can't sell any liquid dinosaur. They can't make any money. They go broke. We win the war. Hooray. It's a
Never works out. Oh, by the way, the Iran-Iraq war went from 1980 all the way through. Side note, we heavily sold weapons to Iran at this time. F-4 Phantoms, F-14 Tomcats, rifles. I mean, we outfitted the Iranian military at the time for that Iran-Iraq war. Why? To keep the region from falling apart. People don't realize that if Iran defeats Iraq, Iran then goes into Saudi Arabia. And that's the whole ball of wax. Ayatollah of rock and rolla does not care what happens to the rest of the world. If he gains access to Saudi oil, he could choke out the world. That was the whole premise. We were trying to support Iran. Iraq was Saddam Hussein, the Ba'ath Party, his chaos and stuff. It was kind of a dicey situation. We sold Iran weapons, then they held hostages in Tehran in 1979. We get the hostages back, which, by the way, in 1975, us getting those hostages back was one of the big reasons why Ronald Reagan won the election in 1980. There were other reasons, but that's one of the reasons why he won. He said, I'm never letting that happen again. And then we sell a whole bunch of military equipment to Iran. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know why our government does that. Why do we? I don't know. Probably has to do something with money. Oh yeah, by the way, yes. All of the things he's telling you about in Operation Praying Mantis are lead-ups to the first Gulf War. Yes, Iran sinking Kuwaiti oil tankers caused a chaotic issue, but what it also did was, by the U.S. doing proportional responses, I'm going to tell you how that later causes us to have the first Gulf War. Are you ready? I got to tell you that story when we get to it. Now's not the time. I'm going to shut up now.
Solid plan. So they do exactly that. Then Kuwait comes out of left field and they're like, hey, we've been financially backing Iraq through this entire war for the past 7 years. We need to make sure they win so we can get our money back. So we're going to go ahead and let Iraq use our oil tankers to export oil. So Iran is like, well, that's an easy problem to solve. I'll just blow up all the Kuwaiti oil tankers as well, which is exactly what they do. But here's the catch. Kuwait at this point in time is like the one major exporter of oil that wasn't really part of OPEC, meaning that they were selling oil on the global market significantly cheaper than everybody else, driving down the entire oil market. And now that their oil tankers are getting blown up as well, it means that Kuwait can no longer sell oil on the cheap, meaning that Iran has now inadvertently committed the cardinal sin of the late 20th century, raising gas prices. Now the entire Western world looks over at the Persian Gulf like, the fuck? The ghost of Sun Tzu's sitting there shaking his head like, that's the one exception. I would have messed with any supply line except for that one, because we all know what happens next.
America. Okay, real quick. Yeah, backstory on that. Yeah, so when you think about things like Dubai, United Arab Emirates, people talk about Abu Dhabi and Dubai, this mecca of monetary excess, and it's the Vegas of the Middle East and all this other stuff. It does sit outside the cultural rules of strict Muslim teachings. So it's kind of like a buffer zone. It is kind of like Vegas. You can do a whole bunch of stuff in Vegas you can't do in Utah. That's what I'm saying, okay? Except instead of our desert, it's theirs. You can't do shit in Iran that you can do in Dubai. You can't do stuff in Saudi Arabia you can do in Dubai. But back in the 80s, Dubai didn't have the pull, the power, the moxie, or the money that it does now. Why? Because Kuwait had the corner of the market on cheap oil exports. They ran the show. And they were selling to everybody. They were equal opportunity offenders. What I'm saying is that Kuwait was pissing off everyone. And when I say pissing off everyone, I mean their neighbors. They were the neighbor that put up perfect Christmas lights. They were the neighbor that played music a little bit too late, a little bit too loud in their backyard, and bothered, like, exactly. They were that neighbor. Now, for them, it worked really well up until about the time of this story. The story he's about to tell you 100% happens. But just like Dubai of now, Kuwait was balling. And they didn't exactly shuffle to the step of both Shiite or Sunni Muslim strongholds like Saudi Arabia and Iran. So they kind of skirted the rules. Now, in an effort to help out Iraq, which through the entire 80s, Kuwait sat kind of like a Switzerland on the Euphrates and Tigris River. That's what I'm saying. They're like Switzerland, right? They're out of this thing. However, they were the linchpin. Iraq and Iran were fighting because Iraq needed access to the Persian Gulf. The way it got access to the Persian Gulf, if you look at a map, was mainly through Kuwait. Now, one of the issues with that is Iran also wants Kuwait during this time because Kuwait is how you get to Saudi Arabia. So Iraq's defending Kuwait at the time, which is really hilarious because 2 years after this story, Iraq invades Kuwait and thus the first Gulf War. Why did they invade them? Oh, well, because Kuwait kind of reneged on the deal. They completely pulled back on it. And they just completely didn't care. They became an ally of the U.S. And then the unthinkable happened. Okay, this is a story about how the U.S. can extend their naval power and wipe out a regional superpower. This story also has another hidden meaning, which becomes real poignant 2 years after this story.
Yeah, America then proceeds to assemble the largest naval convoy operation since World War II, send them into the Persian Gulf to protect Kuwaiti oil tankers. It is at this moment that Iran should have been like, well, that's unfortunate, time to figure out plan B, because this obviously is not going to work out. However, they decide that they're going to double down. What they're going to do is they're going to take a bunch of magnetic underwater mines, and they're just going to spread them out all over the Persian Gulf in international waters, and that's not going to have any consequences at all. So fast forward April 14th, 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a guided missile frigate, which is basically brand new at this point, this is like its first big operation, is out there escorting a Kuwaiti oil tanker, and it runs into a minefield, hits a mine, blows up the keel of the ship. The keel is this bottom part right here. It like supports and stabilizes the structure of the entire ship, and it gets blown.
It's also the ballast. Most of the keel of a ship is everything below the waterline as well. So it has all of your ballast tanks, a lot of your stabilization in there as well. But it is the core of the ship. He is correct about that. Another thing that people don't realize is the Samuel B. Roberts was a modern Oliver Perry class, but it wasn't an Arleigh Burke. The Oliver Perry class was an outstanding ship. However, at the time, guided missile frigates didn't have vertical launch tubes like we see them obviously how they have now. This one had the swiveled mount with the dual launchers that would go down, reload, and then track. So its rate of fire was significantly reduced. However, it did have the Aegis system. If you wanted to understand what the Aegis system is, check out the habitual line crosser. He can tell you all about it. Basically, what the Aegis system is we see all, we kill most.
Completely in half. At this point, the only thing holding this boat together is the actual deck. 1 second, everything's fine. The next second, there's a 15-foot wide hole in the bottom of your ship. Everything's on fire and water is rushing in. The USS Samuel B. Roberts took on half of its weight in water in the first minute. This is a catastrophic amount of damage that would sink 99% of ships, but as fate would have it, the crew of the USS Samuel B. Roberts had already been winning competitions for having the best damage control crew in the Navy. So the entire crew gets to work. They're putting out fires, they're plugging holes, they're literally cinching the hull together with steel cables trying to stabilize it, because the only thing holding it together is a deck at this point. Over the course of the next 5 hours, the entire crew fights their ass off and somehow manages to get the situation under control and limp the ship all the way back to Dubai where they can get it to a port. And
now,
the most incredible part of all of it, not a single American was killed, only 10 men were injured during the fire and the initial explosion. So
okay, let's talk about damage control real quick, just so we can kind of, wow, you look really drunk and high. That's better. Okay, sorry, Nick. Okay, real quick, damage control. For those who do not know what damage control is, it's not just about, oh, we should stop the boat from leaking so it doesn't sink. No, it's actually way more involved than that. In the Navy, and I come from a Navy family. Unfortunately, I went to the Army because my dad, after Vietnam and everything else, said no. My cousin was a submariner, and he went to submarine school in Groton, Connecticut, and he almost failed out of submarine school. Not because he was claustrophobic. Everyone thinks that most people fail because they get claustrophobic, and when they go underwater in a giant steel tube, and they can't pass. Actually, the attrition rate, and most people fail in 2 areas of study at submarine school. Number 1, math. Apparently, you have to be able to add and subtract to go under, negative buoyancy, and then come back up, positive buoyancy. Didn't know that. Apparently, you got to have math. Number 2, and this one's where they most fail, the highest fail rate is during damage control. I don't know how it's done now. I'm sure it's even more elaborate and higher technology training now. But back then they had the flood tank, which is a giant constructed water tank that is built to mimic the machine room inside of a submarine or Navy ship. They had flanges and pipes. They had seams in the walls that represented welded seams. And at any time, they could generate any form of damage from shock, overpressure, or from under pressure, like the pulling apart of a pipe, literally at a moment's notice. And they could flood the room with ice cold water. Why ice cold water? Because they're trying to mimic exactly the conditions of doing damage control in a submarine in the North Atlantic, because not every sailor gets to have that cushy Roosevelt Roads Puerto Rican assignment. Anyway, yeah, so that's where most of them fail. The Navy does a lot of work in damage control, okay? And the way I know that is because of my father. My father served in Vietnam. He was in the special boat teams in the lower Mekong Delta. That's what he did. He drove one of the jacuzzi boats. He was also a gunner. He was a master chief, and he was the captain of his vessel. The other thing he did before that was he was a UDT, an underwater demolitions technician, and a Navy salvage diver. He knows a lot about salvage. And one thing he told me about, the training methods for the Navy in damage control are so incredible because the Navy knows how to blow up boats better than anyone. And if you've ever seen a Fat Electrician video, you know, apparently no one touches our boats. We touch our boats all the time. Yes, my dad trained on how to blow up any type of vessel with limpet mines, magnetic mines. That's what he did. He also learned how to clear beaches for amphibious landings, but underwater demolition was what he did. His job was to try to figure out the best way to break the keel of a ship using an underwater demolition charge and cause the most amount of shock damage. For the Samuel B. Roberts to do what it did was an astronomical feat, worthy of a Presidential Unit Citation, which they received. So yeah, when he's telling you the story about damage control, it's not like, hey, the boat got hit, let's throw some cable ratchet ties and ratchet this thing up like you're tying down your boat on the back of your trailer to go fishing. No. These guys are doing damage control in the pitch black dark of the hull. Shock damage, probably no lights were working, water's going everywhere. There's a chance of electrocution with water and electricity. There's fuel, there's fumes, there's fire. Nobody does this better than the Navy. And apparently, if you are the best ship in the Navy, the only thing that's sinking you is the U.S. Navy. Let's be honest. Yeah, we're good at that too. So
it to a port. And the most incredible part of all of it, not a single American was killed, only 10 men were injured during the fire and the initial explosion. So the crew survived, the boat's basically completely destroyed, then America sends in an underwater crew, figure out what happened, they find the remnants of the mine, they check out the other mines, yep, they're Iranian. At this point, now somebody has to inform the president, because this is a big deal, and the president at this point in time is, let me check my notes, fucking Ronald Reagan.
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
So they go ahead and they brief Ronald Reagan on everything.
Okay, Ronald Reagan, the 600 ship Navy, okay? Does anybody know what caused the Soviet Union to fall? Yes, it was Chernobyl, but other than Chernobyl, yeah, look that up. That disaster, within 3 years they were done. But okay, Chernobyl was kind of the big one. But the other one was Ronald Reagan said, you know what we could do? Hear me out. We could build a 600 ship Navy. The Soviets will never be able to do so, and even if they try, they will bankrupt themselves. Literally bankrupt themselves. And it worked. A 600 ship Navy, that was his policy. People don't realize, people think that the Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest we ever came to nuclear war. Nah. Actually, it was during the presidency of Ronald Reagan. In 1983 and in 1986, we were that close. A few of those stories can be told to you by Habitual Line Crosser. He does some really good stories about that stuff. But there were a couple times in our, a U.S. Navy Oscar III, okay? A Soviet Navy Oscar III missile boat was patrolling off the coast of North Carolina waiting for a U.S. aircraft carrier to deport the Norfolk Naval Station. In doing so, it got too close to a trawling net. This actually happened. And in 1986, an Oscar III guided missile attack sub from the Soviet Union got caught in a fishing trawl off the coast of North Carolina and had to surface in front of everyone, letting the entire U.S. Navy know I was here, and to get out of the boat and cut the netting off of the wheel so they could limp home. Actually, I think they limped to Havana. But yeah, this kind of stuff was happening in the 80s. Like, we had Soviet submarines right off the U.S. coast. By the way, we knew where all of them were. That's not the point. The point is that they were there. We knew they were there. There was probably a Los Angeles class submarine probably within 5,000 yards of that Oscar III the entire time, ready to shoot if needed. But yeah, they were doing crazy stuff in the 80s. So when he's like, fuck it, Ronald Reagan, nobody messed with Ronald Reagan. I mean, granted, everyone talks about George Bush and post 9/11 and all that stuff. And, you know, people talk about JFK and the Cuban Missile Crisis, Eisenhower, you know, and, FDR and Truman during World War II. You talk about leaders. A lot of military leadership comes from Chairman of Joint Chiefs down. Ronald Reagan kind of pushed from the top. And it was somebody who could crack a joke while telling Gorbachev to go F himself. He did that. Yeah. Told a funny joke while actually smiling and in a way telling Gorbachev, stop effing around because you're about to find out. I believe that was his thing. He did that. The FAFO? Yeah, that was actually started by him. Yeah, it's a true story.
Everything that happened, he's super happy that everybody survived, and he's like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to issue a proportional response.
Okay, and hold on. Sorry, Nick, I keep doing that.
And what the U.S. Navy heard was... Awesome. All right, so...
Okay, again, why are you always looking high?
Here's the plan.
Okay, that's better. All right, yeah, just... No. Hey, you guys! What, you know, nice. I didn't know this episode was about the Goonies movie, but we'll talk about One-Eyed Willie later. Okay, real quick. Question. Okay. This proportional response leads us to the first Gulf War. Follow me along here. Everything he's about to tell you for the rest of the way is an underlying cause of the first Gulf War. Similar to during this time, before this, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan, fights the Mujahideen in the mountains of Afghanistan, and they fight there for 10 years and lose and have to leave. Apparently you can't conquer Afghanistan, and I thought we would know that because the Soviets didn't do it. But here's the thing. We funded the Afghan rebels in their fight against the Soviet Union. We did. Charlie Wilson's War. Ever seen that movie with Tom Hanks? Check out that movie. It's amazing. Okay. And Charlie Wilson was I don't know if he was a congressman or a senator. I'm not sure, but he literally pushed for us to keep funding the rebels in Afghanistan. And now by doing so, he made a bunch of promises. We will build you schools. We will build you factories. We will build you hospitals. We will build and build and build, and we will give you all this money. They're giving them Stinger missiles, laws, weapons, M16s. We're giving the Afghan rebels all this weapons, but we're also telling them we're not the bad guys. We are going to be here. Once you defeat the Soviets, we will be there forever. Charlie Wilson made those promises. The problem is nobody else did. So when the Soviets left Afghanistan, Charlie couldn't keep his promises, and the Afghans were left to starve. Their infrastructure was destroyed. They had no hospitals, no factories, no industry, no trade. Nothing was left. And we left the Afghan people hanging. And the only thing left was poppy fields for opium. And the warlords moved in. And that was the start of the Taliban. Same thing in this respect. Ronald Reagan's proportional policy was a departure from previous administrations where if somebody touched our boats, well, you've seen the other videos. In this case, Ronald Reagan was a very strong president, but he had empathy for the Iranian people. If you ask Ronald Reagan, hey, the Soviets are effing around, what do we want to do? He's like, yeah, he's ready. And he's do whatever we got to do. But when it came to smaller countries, he felt that he could be the bigger man. So he would issue proportional responses. Problem with that is all it did was it told Iraq, if all they did was sink a couple of corvettes and blow up some oil rigs that they're not even using because we attacked one of their own ships, that means America's all talk, but they're not really going to do the bad stuff, right? So Iraq looks over at Kuwait and goes, America's not going to do anything. You can't proportionally respond. If we invade Kuwait, what are you going to do? Proportionally respond? You're not. What they didn't realize was there's also an underlying doctrine that has always existed in the U.S. policy, kind of going back to World War II. At the end of World War II, there were different doctrine policies adapted by the U.S. government. We put our umbrella over Japan and over Australia and the Philippines. And we didn't put our umbrella of protection over Korea. North Korea invades. We don't put it over Indochina, the Vietnam War. We put it over our portion of Germany, but the rest of Eastern Europe falls because we appease that. It's proportional. But we have a doctrine in the Middle East that said oil is king in the industrial age, especially in the 50s and 60s. Oil is king. We're making oil in the US, but not like we did in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and now. But back then, OPEC was making it way cheaper than we were. They were selling it. They were they conglomerated it into OPEC. And our doctrine was this: no matter what, you keep the peace in the Middle East, no matter what you do. We align ourselves with Israel to protect Israel because we have to, because they're our closest ally. But our deal is don't piss off the Ayatollah. Don't piss off Saddam Hussein. Keep feeding money to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, because that's where our bases are, and Qatar. Kuwait is Switzerland. We don't have to worry about them. And we're going to have close ties, and we're going to buy oil from Saudi Arabia to keep them rich, all in an effort to make sure that neither the Sunnis nor the Shiite Muslim sects take over the whole thing. As long as the Sunni Muslims and the Shiite Muslims are at odds, that's an instability in the region to where no one voice says, we own all the oil, everyone does what we say. The whole idea of doing a proportional response to Iran was, we got our hostages back. We never really forgot that. Ronald Reagan was not a fan of that. However, we don't need to push Iran into doing something else, like hijacking an airplane, which they kind of did later. But anyway, that's not the point. But the idea was to do a proportional response rather than doing a lot of, B-2 stealth bombers in the middle of the night, dropping bunker busters. He didn't want to do that. There's a different reason for that, but he didn't want to do that. So Ronald Reagan did proportional responses, which Nick's going to tell you all about. In doing so, he put Iran in check, but all he did was tell Saddam Hussein, what we're going to do. We're not going to invade you. We just do proportions. So if you invade Kuwait, so you have full access to the Gulf, and take one of the richest nations in the Gulf in the Persian Gulf, you're in. America's not going to do anything. So these little non-actions that we do have a tendency to maybe put one evil dictator in check, but it tells another evil dictator, if that's all they're going to do, first Gulf War. So you see how all these different ways that America has done policy seems like a good thing in the time. And then we look back on it, we're like, man, if only we had. I think that is the biggest story of the US military's history. We've had some amazing things that we've done, bar none. We've done a lot of big things. But America's biggest thing in military planning and thinking now is when we look at the past and we look at how things come back to haunt us tenfold, 12-fold, we think, man, if only we had, and therein lies the story. That's all I really have to say about the rest of the story. There is some information I want to give to you about the oil rigs, but we can go into that.
Iran currently has 3 oil rigs in the Persian Gulf that are not being used for drilling oil, but as military bases for their naval operations. So the US Navy is going to go ahead and take out all 3 of those. Now, I don't really know what the guided missile frigate to oil rig exchange ratio is, but
1 to 3. He's really good at delivering these, not great with math. It's 1 to 3. Three oil platforms. The exchange ratio is 1 to 3.
But we're going to go ahead and err on the side of caution and say that it's not quite proportional enough yet. So Iran also really only has like 2 modern naval vessels. That's the Iranian frigate Sahand and the Iranian frigate Sabatland. They're going to go ahead and take out at least one of those, maybe both. We'll see how proportional they want to get. And then by the time they get all that done, that should be a nice 8-hour workday. It'll be time to clock out and go get some ice cream. So in order to get all this done by quitting...
Okay, the joke about ice cream. Do you know the joke about ice cream? Okay. Do you enjoy soft serve ice cream when you go to Chinese food or you go get some tacos? You go to one of those family restaurants and they have the soft serve ice cream machine. Yeah, the Navy invented that in World War II. Yeah, soft serve ice cream was invented by the Navy. Yeah. They did it because the Navy really wanted to offer, it was part of a propaganda campaign, 2 things that the US Navy and the US military really pushed for as part of a propaganda effort for everyone at home was, they created massive Coca-Cola bottling facilities throughout the world. So that way they could bring bottles of Coca-Cola to the troops on the front line and get pictures and newsreels so the folks back home could see how well the government was taking care of their boys in uniform overseas. The other thing the Navy did was they made ice cream ships. I'm not joking. They made ice cream ships. And one of the things that they invented was the soft serve ice cream maker that serves soft serve. What was the first ship to ever have it? The USS Nautilus, actually. Our first nuclear-powered submarine had a soft serve ice cream machine in it. Why? Because Admiral Rickenbacker said so. That's a video that Nick needs to make. Nick, you got to make a video about Admiral Rickover. Yeah. Not Rickenbacker, that's the guy that makes popcorn. No, that's Redenbacher, that's the guy that makes popcorn. Then who's Rickover? Oh, yeah, Rickover, the father of the Naval Nuclear Submarine Force. Yeah. Tell a story about that guy. Holy crap. If you thought Curtis LeMay was the Elon Musk of the Air Force, Admiral Rickover was the Elon Musk of nuclear submarines. And he was ours. Anyway, let's keep going.
They're going to go ahead and establish 3 different surface attack groups. Each group is going to have 2 destroyers and 1 bonus ship. That bonus ship is either going to be an amphibious landing ship or a frigate. Either way, they're all going to be identified as Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. Bravo group is tasked with taking out 2 oil rigs. Charlie group is tasked with taking out the 1 remaining oil rig. And Delta's mission is to go hunt down those 2 frigates and take them out. And then, just for insurance purposes, we're also going to have the USS Enterprise parked right outside the Persian Gulf to provide air support, in case we need it. So, April 18th, 1988, 4 days after the mining of the USS Samuel B. Roberts, Operation Praying Mantis goes into full swing, and Bravo Group shows up at their oil rig first. At which point, they radio over to the oil rig and inform them that they will be blowing it up in 5 minutes and that they should all leave. So, a bunch of people start leaving. They hop in tugboats and take off. Bravo Group, seeing that they're making an honest effort to actually evacuate, agrees to give them 15 more minutes. So, fast forward 20 minutes later, they send out another radio message, hey, time's up. They then fire the 5-inch guns right over the top of the oil rig with the rounds set to airburst, hopefully scaring off any stragglers. And it is at this point that some Iranian military member decides that he is going to audition to be the main character of this story because he hops on a 23mm anti-aircraft gun and opens fire on Bravo Group. And without skipping a beat, one of the 5-inch guns on one of the destroyers just goes poof, and just fucking direct hit smokes this dude. Barely touches the rest of the oil rig. This guy, definitely not the main character, but the
no plot armor. No plot armor for the 5-inch shell.
silver lining, he at least made it into the credits as Baloney Mist Cloud number 1. Now,
the pink mist.
obviously, I'm paraphrasing here, but at this point, Bravo Group radios over to the oil rig one last time, something along the lines of, hey, does anybody else need to find out what it's like to chew 5 gum? Or are you fuckers ready to quit? The oil rig finally radios back and is like, yeah, please cease fire. We're gonna leave. So all the Iranian military members leave. Bravo Group decides to open up on it for a little bit with the 5-inch guns before sending over a couple of Hueys full of Marines. The Marines hop out, place some demo charges, hop back on the helicopters, take off. The entire oil rig blows up, and already things are getting more proportional.
Okay, where does the U.S. Navy, the Marines, and the Navy SEALs learn how to do infiltrations on oil rigs? Louisiana, actually. We can mock them up in Morgan City, Louisiana, also Intercoastal City here in Louisiana. You can go to Texas in Beaumont, and you can practice it on dry land. But we have over 150 abandoned oil platforms in the Gulf of Mexico. The U.S. Navy Special Operations Group, whether it be various Navy SEALs, even Delta Force, whatever different sea, air, land, there's multiple groups. Don't need to get into that. There's plenty of channels on the internet to talk about those guys. But a lot of times, specialized military teams would come to Louisiana. They would go to Intercoastal City, which is about 20 miles south of here. They would talk to the local state trooper office down in Homa and let them know they need to go do some stuff. They jump on a boat, run out there, play around on the big giant metal monkey bars in the ocean. Figure out the best way to do it. Why not? Those 3 oil rigs in the Persian Gulf, built right here in the U.S. Yep, we built them here, and they were barged over there. Hey, man, we used to build everything over here back in the day. We kind of outsource it now. Don't know whose fault that was. That's a different video as well.
And while all that was happening, Charlie Group made it to their first oil rig as well, and pretty much the exact same thing played out. The only differences were Charlie Group didn't have Marines to place the demo charges, they had Navy SEALs, and when the Iranians opened up with the 23mm anti-aircraft guns, they just decided to keep firing 5-inch shells at the oil platform until it burst into flames and burnt the entire thing to the ground. At which point, the commander of the destroyer kind of looked—
Okay, he doesn't make mistakes very often. I've never seen an offshore oil rig burned to the ground. See? Even he can make a mistake, you dicks. Stop trolling me. I get it. Reckless wasn't a mule. It's not. But they're never going to let me live it down. It's kind of a dick move, don't you think? Just saying.
looks over at the Navy SEALs and is like, sorry, I guess you guys get to sit this one out.
Oh, mission got canceled? Good.
And while all that's going down, Bravo Group's already making their way over to the third oil rig, at which point they pick up something on radar, and it's definitely another enemy ship headed right towards them. And at this point, you have to remember, this is the late 1980s. None of the American sailors have seen naval warfare on this scale. The pucker factor is on. They are getting harpoon missiles ready, and they are—
Not just that, but the Persian Gulf is very small for maneuverability. Remember, Iran has put mines everywhere. Maneuverability is at a premium. The Persian Gulf is not that large when you're talking about naval ships for movement, fast, you know. I mean, granted, they talked about the USS, the aircraft carrier, the you know, is outside the Persian Gulf in the Arabian Sea. Granted, its planes can get there, you know, within 45 minutes, but they're out. Why? Because maneuvering an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf is not ideal. Well, that and you got to go through the Strait. But even then, an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf is never a good idea. Ever.
We're about to get in like one of the biggest naval fights since World War II. At which point, whoever's in charge of Bravo Group decides to take a deep breath and they're like, okay, let's send up a helicopter real quick just to verify that it's actually an enemy ship. So the helicopter goes up.
Pretty common practice actually in the Navy. Back in the 80s, we didn't have J-stars. We didn't have the level of technology. Remember, all this is going on pre-internet, okay? GPS exists because the Navy invented it. Radar existed, but we're going to talk about radar in a little bit because those who do not know, habitual line crosser can do all the radar videos you can imagine. That guy can talk about it till he's blue in the face, and that's fine. That's what he does. I'm an RF engineer, so I will talk to you about RF, which is radio frequency. He's about to get into this part of the video, and there's some things I want to explain to you. Back in the day, okay, the helicopters they were using in the Navy, okay, when they send up a helicopter, it's not like what we have now. Now you would send up a Jayhawk, which is a Black Hawk, but it's a Jayhawk. It's designed for naval use with large radar emitters on the front. What's called a MAD detector, magnetic anomaly detector underneath that could detect metal submarines and metal bodies in the water. Didn't have all that cutting edge technology back in the 80s. But what they would do is they would send up a helicopter low on the horizon, and it did have a surface search radar. Why would they send up a helicopter? Why don't they just check with the ship? There's a reason why. In a few seconds, I'm going to tell you why that's the case. There's a reason why they send up the helicopter, and it's not just for let's double check and put some eyes on it. There's another reason.
Radios back to Bravo Group. It's definitely a warship, but it's a Soviet destroyer. At which point everybody's like, what? What is happening right now? So they radio over to this Russian destroyer and they're like, what are your intentions? And the Russian commander radios back in broken English. I swear to God, this is a real quote. I'm just here to take pictures for history. Look, I know that I bash on the Soviet Union and communism every single chance I get, but this time around, I gotta give it to them. These guys know how to party. Just straight up rolling into the middle of the largest naval operation since World War II to eat popcorn and watch. It's incredible. At this point, Iran finally figures out that there's something going on, but they don't really know what, so they just begin attacking any ship they can find, and the first ship they found was a civilian cargo ship called the Willie Tide, that they begin attacking with Boghammer-style speedboats. So the Willie Tide radios for help, the USS Enterprise responds by sending up a bunch of A6 intruders, as well as F-14 Tomcats. The A6 intruders show up, start dropping cluster bombs, they end up hitting one of the speedboats and scattering the rest. The civilian cargo ship is saved, hooray. Cutting back to Charlie Group, now there's an Iranian fast attack ship coming right at them. So they radio over like, hey, yeah, we're kind of going around blowing up all your stuff, but also we've got a very specific list, you're not on it, so how about you just go away and we'll forget we saw you. The Iranian fast attack ship messages back, sounds good, we'll do that. And then they just keep driving right towards them. And then this Iranian fast attack ship gets within like 15 miles of Charlie Group, which is like point blank range for a naval battle. Charlie Group radios again, dude, what are you doing? To which they respond, I'm following orders. And then they proceeded to lock their radar on Charlie Group.
Okay, this is, Jesus, he's drunk again.
Which Charlie Group can see.
Jesus, this is horrible. Okay, that's better. I mean, he looks high, a little, yeah. He looks like he enjoyed the gas chamber in basic training. Let's move on. Okay, real quick, let's talk about locking on radars to a Navy vessel. This is something that's not covered by a lot of people, so I'm going to tell you how this works. There's a thing called passive sensors, active sensors. Now, there's a thing called a transmitter, and there's a thing called a receiver. There's also a thing called a transceiver that does both. Okay, we all know that submarines have to be quiet. If you can stay undetected and you can detect the other person, game over. Fair? Fair. We've all seen Hunt for Red October. Great movie. The way this works is very simple. There's a giant sonar emitting dome in the front of a Los Angeles class, Virginia class, Seawolf class attack submarine. They also have them on the boomers, like the future Columbia and the Ohio class boomer submarines. However, that radar, that sonar emitting dome is almost never used because it's loud as hell. It's pretty much like setting off a nuclear weapon audibly in the water. So what you're trying to do is this. A submarine is going to stay super quiet. And there's a reason why I'm talking about submarines, because when I tell you about the other side, you can be like, oh, okay. Submarine stays quiet. They listen with passive sonar. It's a receiver, speakers that receive audio and sound waves bouncing through the water, okay? A sound travels much further in water because of viscosity. It doesn't matter. Essentially, you want to listen, but you don't want to say anything. If you use the giant domed spherical sonar emitter in the bow of a submarine, you are literally going to send out a giant sound wave out. And then whatever it hits is going to bounce back, and you're going to know exactly where someone is. However, they already know where you are because you turned on a light switch in the middle of the room, standing in the middle of the room going, I'm right here. So we never use that. It's called a Yankee search. You don't do a Yankee search unless you're literally telling the enemy exactly where you are and what to shoot at before you even get a ping back. So it's never done. Okay, what does this have to do with what he's talking about? Remember when they said they put up a helicopter up to check that vessel? Have you ever seen an E-2 Hawkeye? If you don't know what an E-2 Hawkeye is, it's a turboprop aircraft with foldable wings and a giant radar, a pancake-shaped flying saucer-looking rotational radar dish, okay? Why do they have an E-2 Hawkeye? Well, it's a very good point. They can put the E-2 Hawkeye 250 miles away from the aircraft carrier, actively search with an active radar beam, which is shooting out RF radio frequencies out and getting stuff back. But it's not the aircraft carrier. It's just an E-2 Hawkeye. Here I am. Yeah, I'm loud and I'm showing I can see everybody, but I'm just the E-2 Hawkeye. I'm not the aircraft carrier you're looking for. That's a Jedi joke. I can't help you. Anyway, moving on. So essentially what Bravo, Charlie, and Delta Group were doing is they set up a helicopter with a surface search radar. It would turn on its radar so it could spot the different vessels and identify the vessels itself without letting the enemy know where our ships were. Our ships now have that multi-directional, you've seen them on the Arleigh Burke class, those little oval panels on the superstructure. That is a form of multi-directional radar array. Super high tech. I don't know how it works. Go talk to the habitual line crosser. But back in the 80s, we had some of that, but not every ship had that. Also, when you use it, you are kind of announcing yourself a little bit. And that radar is only usable up to the horizon. How far is the horizon in the Persian Gulf? Pretty much like everywhere else, about 15 miles. So what about ships that are 40 and 50 miles away? You put a helicopter up, it can see further over the horizon. That's what you use. So this ship was close enough to put its radar on, its active radar, sees Bravo Group, Now that it sees them, it has a targeting solution for its missiles. Here's the thing. We aren't the only people with harpoons. We aren't the only people. We are not the only nation with exocets or silkworms, or Russia's selling them to everybody too. Of course, we sold Iran harpoon missiles. Okay, anyway, so we sold them. The way a harpoon works is a harpoon or an exocet missile can be launched from an aircraft or from a surface platform, and it is a radar seeker head. But when it launches, it is not actively on. You have to program the missile to fire, go a certain distance away from the vessel that shot it. It's called a safety range. It goes downrange far enough, and then it turns on its seeker head to a specific heading and distance that is programmed into the solution. That way, it doesn't turn around and come back and kill you. Okay? So now that this boat has painted or used its radar to see Bravo group, it now has firing solutions on the different vessels. It can now launch missiles. That's a big no-no, because in naval terms, once missiles are in the air, they're not coming back. So at that point, the Navy has a full solution to fire. Now, for it to do that, it would have to either turn on its radar to see those vessels, but it's got helicopters up with surf search radars that they already know where those other boats are. They've already put in that information into their firing computers. I think it's the BSY-1 at that time, or the BSY-3 at that time was the ones that was used. And so basically, once they put the radar on them, they're like, well, now at this point, the enemy can fire. Do we give them a reason to fire, or do we just shoot now? Back then, you shot then. They didn't really have the Sea-Whiz, which is the rotational 30 millimeter or 20 millimeter rotational Gatling gun to shoot down weapons. They didn't have different Sea Sparrows and they certainly didn't have the laser mounts and all the other different countermeasures. They did have chaff canisters that would launch into the air and blow out aluminum foil everywhere. It's kind of cool. They did have Prairie Masker, which was a form of the way to defeat submarines, where there was a metal ring around the outside of the ship's hull that would shoot out air bubbles. And the air bubbles would mask the sound of machinery noises inside of a vessel by using air bubbles to diffuse, so enemy submarines couldn't detect American frigates and ships easily. And it was that's the Prairie Masker. They had those as well. So they have all these different things that you can use, but the biggest one was to stay quiet. Now, there's the way that the Bravo group and Charlie group knew that the other vessel had detected them and had locked onto them or painted them with their radar is there's a mast. There's an actual mast. It's an antenna mast on every naval vessel. And it's called an ESM. It's electronic sensory mast. And it detects any RF signal from any direction. If a radar comes that way, it will see it. It will also detect all forms of radio frequencies. It's an ESM receiving antenna. So basically they're like, oh God, there's a radar over there. And they can detect that from far off, and it gives them a kind of a direction, maybe not a plotting solution like a radar would do. But all these things are playing around all at the same time in the Persian Gulf, limited maneuverability, still probably mined someplace. And we know that there's a Russian frigate out there, which we don't want to engage. So we have to be very careful of our firing solutions. It gets kind of hairy. Let's continue.
Group can see. At which point Charlie Group immediately launches 5 missiles directly at the Iranian vessel. The Iranian vessel fires a harpoon missile back at Charlie Group. Both groups now have missiles in the air screaming towards one another. The Americans launch countermeasures shooting up chaff rockets that end up catching the harpoon missile, detonating it in midair. The Iranian vessel, on the other hand, did not have any countermeasures capable of stopping the newer technology behind the American missiles, and it would end up getting sunk pretty much immediately. Then, before anybody can really even fully digest what just happened, radar picks up 3 Iranian F-4s screaming towards Charlie Group. Charlie Group then turns.
Charlie Group has to be careful. Okay. Back in the day, in the 80s, the F-4 Phantom was still a significant fighting weapon. Until the F-14 Tomcat came around, the F-4 Phantom II ruled the fucking skies. It had the world records for highest altitude, highest speed. Other than the SR-71, the F-4 Phantom II was the badass of the U.S. Navy and Air Force. We sold some to the Iranians. Again, good job, Jimmy Carter. Here's the thing. The F-4 Phantom can carry Exocet and harpoon missiles. Harpoon missiles are bad enough. But at this time, in 1982, during the Falklands War, the British Navy found out really bad an Exocet missile is. The British Navy lost vessels, warships, just as capable as ours, to Exocet anti-ship missiles launched from A5s, which are a tiny little airplane, but that's all Argentina had. But the Exocet can be fired at 150 nautical miles. Basically, in the Persian Gulf, a plane could take off from their airbase on land, make it to altitude, and barely over the water, fire an Exocet. Granted, they're flying blind, they're firing it blind, but if it has Exocets on board, these are ship killers. They could kill cruisers and frigates of the U.S. Navy. Probably not a battleship. I was gonna say battleship. We didn't have battleships back then. We did. The Iowa was still rolling at this time. USS Iowa was still rolling, but not big enough to sink a carrier. But they were ship killers for this Bravo group. So that's a serious situation.
Fires a bunch of surface-to-air missiles at the F-4s. The F-4s see them coming. They're like, oh shit. They pop a U-turn and try to outrun them. F-4s, while they are extremely fast, can't outrun missiles, so one of the missiles ends up blowing a wing off one of the F-4s. Now America has taken out an entire naval vessel and an F-4 that they did not plan on taking out, and it's throwing off all of our proportions. And because of that, American leadership orders Bravo Group to stand down. We're not going to go take out that third oil rig. And right as soon as that order gets given out, Delta Group chimes in as like, hey, we found that frigate we were looking for. So now nobody knows what to do, because on one hand, things are already getting out of control, but on the other hand, we really want to take out these frigates. So American leadership decides, well, we might not even have to make a hard decision. Maybe that's not even the frigate and the radar's wrong. Why don't you go ahead and send a couple A6 intruders over, do a flyby. They can verify that it's actually this new modern frigate, and if it is, we'll make a decision from there. Or so they thought, because the A6 pilots are about.
Okay, here's the thing. He's about to tell you that the A6 pilots are about to be the heroes of this story. There's always a hero to the story. So far, there wasn't one except for the damage control crew aboard the Samuel B. Roberts. But A6 pilots are a little bit weird. Let me explain it to you. When I was in the Army, I was dust off. I was a medevac. I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for basic training. Then I went to Fort Sam Houston for combat medic. Then I went to Fort Campbell for 2 things, to do flight ops, air crew for medevac, helicopters, and also air assault school, which is 10 days. Really weird. For 10 days, we're going to have you run around wearing boots, singing a bunch of songs, and then we're going to teach you how to slide down ropes and rappel out of helicopters. 10 days, there's your thing. There's your blood badge, get the hell out, and go find something to do. But I went to air crew and to dust off. I learned how to do it in a Huey. That's how old I am, okay? We learned air assault school and flight crew training in Hueys. Yes, from Vietnam, Hueys, UH-01s, okay? This is in the 1980s, okay? Huey pilots were different than Black Hawk pilots. The Black Hawks were coming online, 5 rotors, super powerful, super stable, fast, maneuverable, much more carrying power, amazing aircraft. We still use them to this day. Huey pilots were all ex-Vietnam vets, a little fucking nuts. They would do shit in Hueys that would get anybody else grounded. A6 intruder pilots are the Huey pilots of aircraft carrier flight ops. In the Vietnam War, A6 intruders, check out the movie Flight of the Intruder. Great movie, awesome movie. Check that one out. It's old, but check it out, okay? It's worth a watch. A6 intruder pilots sat side by side, bomber pilot side by side, and literally side by side played Thelma and Louise, I Dare You To, I Double Dog Dare You To. And then they would go and do that shit. So A6 intruder pilots, really good ones with flight hours in Vietnam, which I'm pretty sure these guys were, because of the crap he's about to tell you. Stuff like, I don't know, water skiing and aircraft in combat.
To decide that they are in fact the main characters of this story. You see, the USS Enterprise and its aircraft aren't really supposed to be doing a whole lot. They're more or less just there for insurance. In fact, they're only allowed to engage the enemy under one of two conditions. One, the President of the United States signs off on it, which is actually what happened with the speedboats earlier. Or two, they get fired upon first. So
okay, this is where the fuck around and find out portion of the story comes in. The A6 pilots know two things. Number one, they know exactly what they can do with their aircraft. The other thing they know is, if we do this right, the Iranians are going to shoot at us. They've got no chance of hitting us, and we have our rules of engagement qualified. I shit you not.
They got told to go fly by this boat to verify that it is in fact the new modern frigate.
Fly by. Boats here, airplanes are here. It's not what they do.
But they didn't get told how to fly by the boat, so they drop down 50 feet above the water and just gun it, and they buzz the entire ship. So the ship opens fire with its AA guns, but these planes are so low to the water, the AA guns can't actually aim down low enough, so all the anti-aircraft fire goes right over the top of them. They continue to stay low enough till they get out of anti-aircraft gun range, and then they pull up, at which point the ship launches a bunch of surface-to-air missiles at them. They drop chaff as a countermeasure, takes care of those, no big deal. They then go around, do a U-turn, send a radio message to this frigate, I'm going to sink you now, which they can now legally do because remember, the ship fired on them first.
You fell victim to one of the classic blunders.
So the A6 fires an anti-ship harpoon missile, and the second they pull the trigger on that, the fire control team from the USS Enterprise is like, what the fuck are you doing? We're not supposed to be killing things yet. And the A6s are like, look, they fired at us first. Them's the rules. And the USS Enterprise...
It is so much easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. A rule proven by U.S. Navy pilots since World War II. Over and over and over again.
This is like, holy shit, okay, I guess. Let him have it. Then the harpoon missile finally makes impact. It's a bullseye. The A6s do a U-turn, go, drop another 500-pound laser-guided bomb right through the deck of this frigate, fly past it, do another U-turn, come back, drop a 1,000-pound bomb on it. Then they radio over to the Enterprise and like, yeah, it's definitely gonna sink. We're gonna head back. So the A6s take off, headed back to the Enterprise, and like 5 minutes later, Delta Group shows up with their warships and begin firing on the already sinking frigate. They hit the magazine, the frigate explodes, rapidly sinks to the ocean floor. At this point, naval leadership is like, okay, Jesus Christ, everybody stop killing things. We need to figure out what all happened. We got to keep this proportional, remember. So they start radioing back and forth. Everybody's figuring out what everybody did, if anybody's hurt, what's going on, the whole story. And then as the A6s are making their way back to the USS Enterprise, guess what they happen to fly past? The other modern frigate. So now the entire US Navy's looking at this last frigate like SpongeBob looking at a jug of water.
I don't need it. I don't need it.
I need it!
But Also, like realistically speaking, the A6s are pretty much out of ammunition. The only thing they have left are 2,000-pound bombs, and those just aren't going to be enough by themselves without a harpoon missile to take down this ship anyways, so they really are just going to fly by and verify that it's the modern frigate. So the
so why... Sorry, Nick, you look drunk again. You're never going to pass these field sobriety tests at this rate, but why are two 1,000-pound gravity bombs not effective against the ships, and yet a harpoon missile with a 600-pound warhead is enough? It's the way that it's used. 1,000-pound bombs will land on the deck or into the superstructure and blow up on impact. It'll cause superstructure damage, possibly some hull damage, but the keel will stay intact. Remember, he talked about how important the keel is. Harpoon doesn't do that. A harpoon will literally do one of two things. It will either sea surface skim, go into the side of the ship, and has a what's called a penetrator fuse. After so many milliseconds after impact, it knows to explode right above the keel, breaking the back of the ship downward. Or it also can do a pop-up maneuver. We'll actually sea skim as close as it can. Sea skimming, because if it flies high, anti-aircraft could possibly shoot it down. We don't want that. So it sea skims, gets about a half a mile, does a pop-up maneuver, and then comes straight down into the vessel. Also doing the same thing. Has a proximity gravity set fuse. Once it makes impact, so much time goes through before the inertia trigger sets it off. Hopefully either at the bottom of the ship or actually through the bottom underneath the ship, causing the keel to break from an overpressure under it. By the way, torpedoes in the U.S. Navy, Mark 48 ad-cap torpedoes, are, other than the English Tigerfish and I think there's a new one they have now. The ad-cap Mark 48 ad-cap torpedo has been the Navy's main torpedo they've had in their submarine force since the 1980s. It has been in service for 40 years because it's just that good. No Mark 48 ad-cap torpedo will ever hit a ship to sink it. It will swim under the ship and detonate right underneath the keel, breaking the back of the ship. And yeah. And we have different ways, different armor mod packs in them now and magazine packs now where they actually can do even worse things. The geometry is crazy and it's crazy dumb. But anyway, yeah, that's why the gravity bombs that they had, you're looking at, well, why would 2,000-pound bombs not be enough, but a harpoon would be? It's because the way the harpoon is designed to explode at certain places on the ship that the Navy has researched exhaustively, like me talking in this video exhaustively, on how to sink vessels easier. So think about that.
6 intruders go ahead, they do their flyby. It is in fact the new frigate that they thought it was, and it does in fact open fire on the A6s.
Of course, why not?
A6s make it out completely unscathed, at which point they pop a U-turn and one of the A6 pilots is like,
It's the bullseye womp rats in my T-16.
Why not?
So the A6 pulls up, gaining altitude, and then dives down, aims its nose right at the frigate at like a 35-degree angle. They're doing a good old-fashioned dive bombing run like it's fucking World War II. The AA guns start firing, there's bullets whizzing past the plane, but they're committed now. They're closing in, closing in. The bombardier behind the pilot lets the pilot know, hey, I'm locked on.
Side by side. They sit side by side in an A6. Bombardier is in the right seat, pilot left, not behind him. That's 2 fuck-ups. Again, I do way more, but he's so good at this, I gotta point out the little ones. I gotta take hits when I can. Fuck it, man. It's bad enough. I'm gonna ruin all of these reactions every single time I do them. Let me have little wins, damn it. He's not a mule. I get it. Sergeant Reckless, not a mule. Thoroughbred. Amazing specimen. Horse of the century. Got it. Fuck you, Secretariat. Reckless. Got it. Thanks. Okay, moving on.
point, bombs away, the pilot pulls up, and the bomb goes right down the fucking smokestack of this boat. Blows up, completely destroying the entire engine room. That frigate is now dead in the water with no power. The A6s go ahead and radio in that they have completely disabled this frigate, at which point the American leadership calls a complete ceasefire. They're gonna go ahead and let that frigate survive, get towed off, potentially be repaired. With the US Navy having effectively disabled or destroyed over half of Iran's functioning navy, the US military decides to call it a good day, ends Operation Praying Mantis, we all get to live happily ever after. Except, later that night, Iran decided that they wanted to fight a little bit more, and they launched a bunch of Silkworm anti-ship missiles at American vessels. Luckily, no American vessels were actually hit. However, this is now a huge political problem because America has been mad at the fact that Iran even had Silkworm missiles for years at this point, and the American government has made it very clear to Iran that if they ever used them, they would be going to war with America. Period. That's set in stone. So the Reagan administration, not wanting to kick off World War III in the 1980s, reaches out to the Iranian government and is like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go ahead and admit that that was an accident. I'm going to sweep it under the rug and we're never going to talk about it again, because if this makes headline news and the American people find out, I'm going to have to get real proportional around here. So Iran's like, okay, fine, whatever, it was an accident, let's sweep that whole thing under the rug. But I am still going to take America to international court to try to prove that it was a war crime to take out my oil rigs. That way I can get reparations and make America pay for it. So they go to international court, they lay out the case. The international court is looking at America like, okay, well, first of all, you're the fraction people. I don't know how you think that this is proportional, but it definitely wasn't. Second of all, according to the Amity Act, you absolutely should not have attacked their oil rigs. This is probably a war crime. At which point the representative for America is like, well, actually, if you read the Amity Treaty between Iran and the United States, it only talks about ships and boats. It don't say shit about oil rigs, meaning I wasn't obligated to not attack those oil rigs. At which point the court is like, hold on. Fucking, he's right, son of a bitch. Okay, well, I guess America's innocent, because I've said it once and I'll say it again. It's never a war crime the first time.
Thank you, Canada. You know, hockey, maple syrup, poutine, and the Geneva Convention. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Now for the best part of the entire story. America now proceeds to go over to Dubai, pick up what's left of the USS Samuel B. Roberts, tow it all the way back to Maine, then take the ship out of the water, get it in dry dock, cut out the entire damaged section of the ship, including the engine compartment, build another module to fit in its place. This thing weighs like 300 tons. They jack it up, weld it right where it's at, get everything rehooked up, reconnected, and this boat is back out on the ocean 1 year later on April 1st, 1989. It then goes on to get recommissioned and serves in the Navy until 2015. I mean, playing Battleship against America's gotta suck, right? Like, haha, I've sunk your frigate, and America's like, first of all, no, you didn't. Second of all, fuck your entire Navy as it picks up your board and just throws it at the wall. So in conclusion, if you do ever find yourself being the leader of a foreign nation one day, the best advice that I can possibly give you is A, do whatever you can to not raise gas prices, and B, whatever you do not fuck with America's boats. We do not like that shit. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is like, comment, subscribe, maybe go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
All right, so there you go. The Fat Electrician. I'm subscribed. Why the hell are you not? He's almost to 2 million subscribers, and he's earned every single one of them. Yes, we're going to keep doing these. I'm going to film them on Wednesday nights during my weekly Twitch stream on Wednesday nights. We do What the Hell Wednesday. It seems like a good time to do them. We'll do different videos. We'll do some of the Fat File ones. There's actually a Fat Files video I haven't seen. Actually, 2 of them. It's the Taco Bell one and the Aldi one. I've seen the one about the Waffle House, which is my favorite video of all time. But yeah, someone said there's an Aldi one and one about Taco Bell, which I have to see. So we're going to check that one out. So yeah, we're going to check these videos out on Wednesdays. If you enjoy them, let me know. If you hate everything I'm doing, you're not alone. And that's awesome. All right, everybody. I'll have all of the Fat Electrician's information in the description below. Please check him out. Again, if you want more information about modern radar and missile tech, Habitual Line Crossers, another great channel. And some donut guy, you can check him out too. He's making fun of people in bad situations. which is actually one of the funniest things ever. All right, everybody. I'm going to go, but I'll be back. And who knows, maybe I'll be ready. No. Thanks for watching, everybody. And if you enjoyed this video, give us a like. It really helps the channel grow. Also, if you want to subscribe, right over there. A big thank you to all my Patreons out there for everything you do. And if you want more content like this, check them out above. Remember, love one another, take care of each other. We're all stuck on this mud ball together. We'll see you later.